Hi everybody, this is Unit 1, Business Management, and it's our Area of Study 3. Area of Study 3 in Business Management, as you guys can see, is all about the internal environment. So we've actually spent some time talking about the external environment. Hopefully you remember there were two elements of the external environment, both macro and operating factors. And in the internal environment, the good news is there's only one that we need to worry about. So we're going to be talking about the internal environment of a business, and we're going to start that this afternoon by talking about the resource needs that a business actually requires from the internal environment when it begins its operation. So let's have a look. The main thing we need to understand when we're running a business, particularly in terms of the internal environment, is that there's always going to be a category of resources that are necessary for us. There are three categories of resources that business owners need to be concerned with. And some of you might have heard of these. If you do economics, you would have heard of land, labour and capital resources, and that's what we're going to be talking about in the internal environment. So our definition of a resource, it's all of those people and objects that we'd need for our business to function properly. So we're going to have a look at both natural resources, labour resources, and obviously capital resources. And it's probably a good idea to think about natural resources. We'll often talk about things like land. Labour resources, we'll talk about people and actual workers. And capital resources, we'll talk about things like machinery and equipment. So let's have a look at natural. So as the name suggests, natural resources are from the natural environment. So in economics, we often talk about land, labour and capital. So land is a good example of a natural resource. In addition to land, anything like water, trees, grass, wheat, anything like that is natural. It's therefore a resource that a business can use. Obviously, a business needs to ensure that it uses its natural resources wisely and doesn't harm the natural environment, because if it does, these are the resources that the business actually depends on. So if you're a forestry business, if you're a logging company, you knock down all the trees in your area and there's none left, then you obviously haven't taken very good care of that. So business owners need to ensure that the natural resources or the land resources that they use, use them as wisely as possible. Okay. Labour resources are the second type of resources that we've been talking about. Labour resources, it's always just about the people or the workers in the particular business. So the main source of labour for a business is going to be the workers or the employees and the actual business owner themselves. Now, what some businesses will do is actually hire what they call subcontractors. And what that means is that you don't have them permanently as part of your workforce, but you might use them now and then when times get busy. So for example, if I was producing hand sanitizer as an example, we'd probably get a lot of subcontractors working for us at the moment because we'd be really, really busy. But then when things go back to normal, we don't need those people on our books. So subcontractors are just people who will be employed when we actually need them. One of the things we'd want to be careful about with labour, of course, is that as technology gets more and more advanced, then a lot of the labour doesn't actually be as needed as it was in the past. And many jobs have unfortunately been taken over by machinery and technology, and that's going to be another issue for businesses down the track. Obviously, if we're talking about labour resources, we're talking about people. So one of the things that business owners want to make sure is that you treat your staff well, that you treat them properly. We don't just look at them as a resource which can be removed or replaced very easily. So treating workers with respect is a very important aspect of managing our labour resources. So the sort of questions we might ask when we're talking about labour are the kind of, well, what kind of skills do we need our workers to have? What kind of qualifications would they need? How will our business attract and retain these workers? So many people would want to work for certain businesses. That's fantastic for those businesses. But then How do those companies keep those people? How do we stop them from going either to our competitors or to moving on? So we don't just want to attract really good employees, we actually want to retain them as well. And of course, one way of doing that is offering good training to our workers that would help them grow, develop their career, and it benefits the business as well. Some of the other questions would be, are we providing fair pay, healthy working conditions for our employees? You would probably have noticed with all the stuff going on at the moment with the virus, a lot of businesses are looking after their staff, providing them with personal protective equipment, making sure that there's social distancing in the workplace so that the employees themselves aren't put at risk. What legal responsibilities does the business have to its employees? Well, we know we need to give them holidays, we need to give them time off if they're sick, and obviously we need to pay them properly as well. If we have any disputes between the employees and the business, how are we going to solve those? We might discuss them. It would be a very good thing to do first. We might actually have to go to more legal solutions if we can't actually get an agreement. You might have noticed, for example, the AFL players with no AFL season going on at the moment needed to take a pay cut because there is no income for the business or the AFL. So how did they arrange that? They negotiated it, they discussed it over a few days and came to an arrangement. And obviously the last one is just what the business itself, where is it located? If it's located out in the middle of the desert, that's going to mean that only certain types of workers would want to go there, and it might make it more difficult to meet all of those kind of labour requirements. All right, let's look at the which is next. And as I said to you guys at the start, capital resources are all those kinds of machinery and equipment that are used to produce a good or service. So we normally talk about things that you can see from the picture: trucks, buildings, money itself is a capital resource as well. When we refer to them, a business obviously has to have capital resources, because if they don't, it's going to be difficult to produce anything. Factories are a great example of a capital resource, because the whole building is purpose built to produce a particular good or service. So the kind of questions a business might need to ask: well, what kind of tools and machinery would we need in terms of our capital resources? And how's the business going to look after its capital equipment? For example, if it breaks down, if it has some faults with it, how long would it take to get fixed? What might that mean for our business itself? And obviously, do our employees have the skills, the right workers to actually operate the machinery? So we've got the right people in the right places that are talented enough to use that particular equipment. So what we've looked at is natural, labour and capital resources. So let's have a look at some couple of slides. I'm asking you guys, I think it would be a great idea to create a document, and we'll answer these questions. They're pretty straightforward questions and easily enough to just flick back through the earlier slides and you should be able to find some answers to these questions. So I'll give you a few minutes for them. And just on this last one, or second last one I should say, think about the businesses that I've listed here and what kind of resources would be used by these businesses. So for example, if you're thinking about a beauty salon as a business, well, what kind of resources would they need? In terms of natural resources, they might need some water, obviously if they're going to be washing hairs and stuff like that. In terms of capital equipment, we might be talking about things like hair dryers and scissors and that kind of thing. And labour resources would probably be the employees themselves working in those particular businesses. So what I'd like you guys to do with this particular set of businesses is just draw up a little table with natural, labour and capital as your headings, and work out, well, what would be the natural resources for this business, what would be the labour resources for this business, and what would be the capital resources for this business. This last slide is a pretty straightforward one as well. All we really want you to do with this one is to look at the following resources that we've listed and create a little, or just tell me which one is natural, which ones would be labour, which ones would be capital. For example, the first one is a tractor on a small commercial farm. Well, it's not a natural resource because a tractor is not made by nature. It's not a labour resource because it's not an employee, but it is a capital resource because it's a capital piece of equipment that business would be using. So can I get you guys just to work your way down that list and allocate natural, labour or capital to each of those resources? And as I said before, if you guys have any questions at all, just go back over the slides that we've been looking at and you should be able to work it out. All right, good luck with that. Thanks, guys.